My sister's destination wedding turned into a soap opera after I accidentally revealed her bridesmaid was her husband's ex. Now the entire family is taking sides, and the open bar is officially out of rum. Okay, deep breaths. I'm still trying to process everything that went down, and honestly, typing this out feels like the only way to even begin to make sense of the utter chaos my life has become. So, here it is. My sister's destination wedding turned into a full-blown, primetime soap opera, and guess who lit the match? Yeah, that would be me. And now, the entire family is drawing battle lines, the bride isn't speaking to me, the groom looks like he's seen a ghost, and perhaps most tragically, the open bar at this fancy Caribbean resort is officially, devastatingly, out of rum. Yes, you read that right. No more mojitos to drown our sorrows. This is my life now. Let's rewind a bit. My sister, Amelia, has always been the golden child. Perfect grades, perfect hair, perfect everything. She met James about 3 years ago. He's a doctor, charming, good-looking, the whole package. Or so we thought. They decided on a destination wedding in St. Lucia. Think pristine white beaches, turquoise water, those fancy overwater bungalows you see on Instagram. It was supposed to be idyllic, a fairy tale. And for the first 24 hours, it kind of was. We flew in, the weather was stunning, the resort was breathtaking. There was a welcome barbecue on the beach, fairy lights twinkling, steel drums playing. You know, the works. The bridal party was a mix of Amelia's college friends and a couple of cousins. One of her bridesmaids was a woman named Chloe. Chloe was striking. Very put together, very confident, a bit older than the rest of us, maybe early 30s. I'd met her a couple of times at Amelia's engagement party and bridal shower, but we hadn't really talked much. She seemed nice enough, if a little reserved. Amelia had just said she was an old friend from a work conference years ago who she'd reconnected with. Okay, plausible. The pre-wedding jitters were starting to set in on day 2. Amelia was a bundle of nerves, flitting between excitement and panic. James seemed cool as a cucumber, always the composed one. The bridesmaids were tasked with keeping Amelia calm and hydrated, which mostly involved fetching her champagne and fanning her dramatically by the pool. The incident. God, I still cringe thinking about it. We were all gathered in the bridal suite, a massive, opulent room with a balcony overlooking the ocean. Hair and makeup artists were buzzing around. Mimosas were flowing. The atmosphere was a potent cocktail of excitement, hairspray, and low-level anxiety. I was on my second mimosa, or maybe my third, who's counting at a destination wedding before noon. And feeling pretty relaxed. Someone, I think it was our cousin Lucy, was oohing and eyeing over Amelia's wedding dress, which was admittedly stunning. Then the conversation shifted to past relationships, as it sometimes does when there's a wedding on the horizon. Maybe it's the finality of it, the speaking now or forever holding your peace vibe that gets people reminiscing. One of the other bridesmaids, a bubbly girl named Sophie, started teasing Amelia about some of her questionable college boyfriends. We were all laughing. Then, Sophie turned to James, who had popped in to grab something. All right, James, your turn. Any skeletons in your closet? Any dramatic exes we should know about before Amelia officially ties you down, she joked. James just chuckled, a little nervously I thought in retrospect, and said something bland like, oh, you know, no one worth mentioning. Amelia's the only one for me. Smooth, right? And then, for reasons I will never fully comprehend, my brain decided to make a connection. A faulty, disastrous connection. I'd been chatting with Chloe earlier by the infinity pool. She'd mentioned she used to work in finance in New York before switching careers to graphic design. James is a surgeon in Boston now, but I vaguely remembered Amelia saying he'd done his residency or some specialist training in New York for a couple of years. And Chloe had this air about her, a kind of polished, big city vibe. So, fueled by champagne and a sudden, inexplicable desire to contribute to the banter, I piped up. Oh, speaking of New York exes, James, didn't you date a Chloe from New York for a while? Chloe, you lived in New York, right? I said, turning to her with a big, clueless smile. I genuinely thought I was just making a funny, small world kind of observation. Maybe they'd even laugh about the coincidence. The silence that followed was deafening. Absolutely, terrifyingly, pin-drop silent. The hairspray fumes suddenly felt suffocating. Amelia, who had been beaming, froze mid-sentence, her smile dissolving like sugar in water. James went white. Not pale, but ghostly. I'm about to throw up white. His eyes darted to Chloe, then to Amelia, then to me, with an expression of pure, unadulterated horror. Chloe, to her credit, tried to recover first. She gave a tight, forced little laugh. Oh, New York's a big place. Lots of Chloes, I imagine. But the damage was done. Amelia's eyes, wide and suddenly sharp, were fixed on James. James? What is she talking about? Her voice was dangerously quiet. I started to babble, trying to backtrack. Oh, my God, I'm so sorry, I must be confused. Probably a different Chloe. Silly me, too much champagne, you know how it is. I was practically sweating, my earlier buzz completely evaporated, replaced by a cold dread. James just stood there, looking like a deer caught in headlights. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked at Chloe, who was now staring intently at her perfectly manicured nails, avoiding everyone's gaze. Amelia stood up, her movements stiff. Chloe, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Is this true? Did you date James? Chloe finally looked up, her composure cracking. She bit her lip and nodded almost imperceptibly. It was a long time ago, Amelia. Before I even knew you properly. It was years ago. Years ago. Amelia's voice rose an octave. Years ago. And you're one of my bridesmaids. And you, James, you let me ask your ex-girlfriend to be a bridesmaid at our wedding? And neither of you thought to mention this rather significant detail? The bridal suite, moments before a hub of joyful anticipation, had transformed into a pressure cooker of accusation and betrayal. Sophie and the other bridesmaids looked like they wanted the earth to swallow them whole. My cousin Lucy was slowly backing towards the door. The makeup artist suddenly found something fascinating to inspect on her brush kit. Amelia, darling, please, James stammered, reaching for her hand. It's not like that. It was brief. It meant nothing. We reconnected as friends, that's all. When you and Chloe became close, it just seemed complicated to bring it up. We didn't want to make things awkward. Awkward? Amelia shrieked, pulling her hand away. You think this isn't awkward? My bridesmaid, one of the women who is supposed to be supporting me on my wedding day, slept with my future husband. How is that not the definition of awkward, James? Chloe finally spoke, her voice small. Amelia, I am so sorry. We should have told you. It was stupid. James and I, we dated for about 6 months. It ended, not badly, but it ended. Years later, I met you at that conference, and we genuinely clicked. I valued your friendship. When he and you got together, it was a shock. We talked about it, James and I. We decided it was in the past and that our prior relationship shouldn't ruin your happiness or my friendship with you. It sounds flimsy now, I know. I wanted to disappear. I felt like the world's biggest idiot. My casual, thoughtless comment had detonated a bomb right in the middle of my sister's wedding. I tried to apologize again. Amelia, I am so sorry. I had no idea. I put 2 and 2 together and got a million. Please, don't let this ruin your day. Amelia rounded on me, her eyes blazing. You. How could you? You always have to be the center of attention, don't you, Emily? You couldn't just let me have one perfect day. That stung. Deeply. I wasn't trying to be the center of attention. I genuinely made a stupid, unintentional mistake. But in her eyes, I was the villain. The next few hours are a blur of shouting, tears, and slammed doors. Amelia locked herself in the bathroom. James was pacing the balcony, making frantic phone calls, presumably to his best man or someone who could offer advice on how to undetonate a wedding. Chloe looked utterly devastated and was trying to talk to Amelia through the bathroom door, her apologies muffled. The other bridesmaids didn't know where to look or what to do. Sophie kept shooting me sympathetic but also slightly pitying glances. Lucy had successfully made her escape and was probably already recounting the drama to our aunts and uncles, who were lounging by the pool, blissfully unaware. For now. Eventually, Amelia emerged from the bathroom, her eyes red and swollen, but her expression was steely. "Chloe," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I think it's best if you leave. Not just the suite, but the resort. I can't look at you right now." Chloe's face crumpled. "Amelia, please. No. I mean it. Go. And James," she turned to him, "we need to talk. Alone." And so, Chloe, the disgraced bridesmaid, packed her bags under a cloud of shame and an escort from hotel security. Amelia had apparently called down to demand she be removed, which felt a bit extreme, but Amelia was in no mood for subtlety. I watched her go, feeling a fresh wave of guilt. Whatever her past with James, she clearly hadn't intended for this to happen either. That's when the family schism really began. News of the incident, as it was now being called, spread through the resort like wildfire. My parents were horrified. My mother, a woman who prides herself on seamless event planning and familial harmony, looked like she was about to have a conniption. My father, usually jovial and laid back, was stern and disappointed, mostly with James, but also with me for my lack of tact. Aunt Carol, Amelia's godmother and a renowned drama queen, immediately sided with Amelia, declaring James a duplicitous snake and Chloe a harlot. She also shot me several venomous glares, as if I'd orchestrated the whole thing. Uncle Ben, Dad's brother, who fancies himself a worldly philosopher, kept saying things like, "Ah, the tangled webs we weave," which wasn't helpful to anyone. My cousins split into factions. Some were firmly Team Amelia, offering tissues and outrage. Others, particularly the younger ones who found the whole thing wildly entertaining, were more sympathetic to James, muttering about how it was ages ago, and Amelia was overreacting. A few even secretly thought Chloe was kind of cool for having this scandalous past. And me? I was officially persona non grata. Amelia refused to even look at me. When I tried to approach her to apologize again, she just held up a hand and said, "I can't deal with you right now, Emily." James looked at me with a mixture of despair and resentment. I had, after all, exposed his secret. The wedding was scheduled for 5 p.m. on the beach. For a while, it seemed like it might not even happen. Whispers circulated. Will they call it off? Is Amelia going home? The resort staff looked increasingly stressed, trying to maintain an air of festive cheer while navigating a minefield of familial tension. And then there was the rum. As the drama escalated, so did the consumption of alcohol. The welcome barbecue the night before had already put a dent in the resort's rum supply. But once the news about Chloe and James broke, people hit the bars with a vengeance. My Uncle Barry, who normally sticks to light beer, was seen downing dark and stormies like they were water. Aunt Carol, despite her moral outrage, was single-handedly depleting the mojito ingredients. Even my usually abstemious mother was spotted with a suspiciously large piña colada. By mid-afternoon, as Amelia and James were having some sort of tense, tearful summit in their suite, the door was firmly closed, but muffled shouts could be heard intermittently. The main poolside bar ran out of white rum. Then the dark rum. Then the spiced rum. The bartender, a lovely man named Ricardo who had been nothing but smiles the day before, now looked like a soldier in a losing battle. He kept apologizing, offering tequila or vodka, but for many, particularly the older contingent, the rum shortage was the final straw. No rum at a Caribbean wedding, my great-aunt Mildred was heard squawking. What kind of establishment is this? The wedding, miraculously, did go ahead. Amelia, looking beautiful but with a strained expression that no amount of makeup could hide, walked down the aisle on my father's arm. My dad looked like he was marching to his own execution. James, at the altar, looked like he hadn't slept in a week. The vows, which were supposed to be personal and heartfelt, sounded hollow and rehearsed. There was a palpable tension in the air that even the gentle sea breeze couldn't dissipate. Chloe was, of course, absent. Her spot in the bridesmaid lineup was conspicuously empty, a silent testament to the morning's drama. I stood there in my own bridesmaid dress, feeling like a leper. Every time someone looked at me, I imagined they were thinking, "That's her. That's the one who ruined everything." The reception was even worse. The seating chart had clearly been a casualty of the afternoon's events, because no one seemed to know where they were supposed to sit, or rather, who they were willing to sit near. Aunt Carol made a big show of moving her place card away from anyone even remotely associated with James's side of the family. Uncle Ben tried to give an impromptu speech about forgiveness and the complexities of human relationships, but was quickly shushed by my mother. The open bar, now severely depleted of its star spirit, was a sad affair. People were grumbling. The band played upbeat tunes to a mostly empty dance floor. Amelia and James did their first dance, looking like two strangers forced into an awkward embrace. There was no joy, no celebration, just a heavy sense of obligation. I tried to talk to Amelia again during a lull. "Amelia, please," I started. "I am truly, deeply sorry." She just looked at me, her eyes cold. "Are you, Emily? Or are you sorry you got caught in the middle of something you blew up?" Before I could answer, she walked away. So here I am, back in my hotel room, the sound of the strained party drifting up from below. I've replayed that moment in the bridal suite 1,000 times in my head. If only I'd kept my mouth shut. If only I hadn't had that third mimosa. If only, if only. The family is fractured. My sister hates me. Her brand new marriage is already built on a foundation of lies and resentment, all brought to light by yours truly. And the resort is still out of rum. I don't know how this gets fixed. I don't even know if it can be fixed. I feel sick to my stomach. What was supposed to be a dream wedding has become an absolute nightmare, and I'm the monster under the bed. Has anyone else ever accidentally caused this much chaos? How do you even begin to make amends when the damage is this widespread? I'm lost. Update 2. Okay, so it's been a few days since my original post, and things have somehow managed to get even more complicated, if that's even possible. Thank you to everyone who commented on my last post. Some of you were sympathetic, some of you thought I was an idiot, fair enough, and a few of you shared your own wedding disaster stories, which made me feel slightly less alone in this pit of despair. But honestly, St. Lucia now feels less like a tropical paradise and more like the setting for a psychological thriller. The wedding night itself was bleak. After Amelia brushed me off, I pretty much retreated to a corner of the reception, nursing a lukewarm glass of questionable punch, since rum was still off the menu, and even the vodka seemed to be dwindling. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken resentments. James's family, who had flown in from all over, looked bewildered and embarrassed. They kept shooting furtive glances at our family, who were huddled together like a defensive line, occasionally muttering darkly. Aunt Carol, I swear, was practically hissing every time James or one of his relatives walked past. The cutting of the cake was an exercise in forced smiles. Amelia and James barely looked at each other. The speeches were clipped and generic. James's best man, a guy named Tom, looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. He made a valiant effort to be funny and heartfelt, but it was like trying to tell jokes at a funeral. My father gave a very brief, very strained speech, mostly about welcoming James to the family, which felt ironic given the circumstances. He didn't mention me, which, in a way, was probably a blessing. I didn't see Amelia or James much after their perfunctory first dance and cake cutting. I heard later they made a brief appearance, said their goodbyes to a few key people, and then retreated to their honeymoon suite, presumably to either have the fight of the century or sit in stony silence. Given the vibes, I was betting on the former. The rest of the guests sort of milled about awkwardly for another hour or so before the party fizzled out. The band packed up early. The once promised late-night beach bonfire was quietly cancelled. The only people who seemed to be having any kind of fun were a group of James's college buddies, who had located a stash of tequila and were doing shots in a secluded corner of the resort, seemingly oblivious to the emotional wreckage around them. Or maybe they were just very good at coping. The next morning was Judgment Day. Or, as I like to call it, the Great St. Lucian Exodus of Shame. Most guests were scheduled to fly out that afternoon or the next day. Breakfast in the resort's main dining hall was excruciating. Families were clustered at separate tables, pointedly ignoring each other. It was like a high school cafeteria after a massive fight, but with more wrinkles and significantly more expensive resort wear. I tried to find Amelia. I figured, new day, maybe she'd cooled off. I knocked on the door of their honeymoon suite. No answer. I knocked again, louder. Finally, James opened it, looking haggard. He was still in yesterday's clothes, minus the jacket and tie. He looked like he'd been wrestling a bear. Or Amelia. "What do you want, Emily?" he asked, his voice flat. "Is Amelia here? Can I talk to her? She's not feeling well. She doesn't want to see anyone. Especially not you." Ouch. "James, I am so sorry about everything. I never meant." He cut me off. "Yeah, I know. You didn't mean to. But you did, Emily. You really, really did." His eyes were cold. "Look, we're dealing with a lot right now. Amelia's devastated. I'm trying to salvage this. We need space." And then he closed the door in my face. Politely, but firmly. So, that was that. My sister, the bride, was officially incommunicado. My parents were next on my apology tour. I found them on their balcony, staring grimly out at the ocean. My mother's eyes were puffy. My father looked 10 years older. "Mom, Dad, My mother just shook her head. "Emily, I don't even have the words right now. Your sister is heartbroken. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. And you, young lady," my father chimed in, his voice stern but weary. "You need to learn to think before you speak. Your loose tongue has caused an incredible amount of pain." "I know, Dad. I feel terrible. It was a stupid, thoughtless mistake. A mistake that has potentially torpedoed your sister's marriage before it's even begun," Mom said, her voice trembling. "And what about Chloe? That poor girl. Humiliated and sent packing. Regardless of her past with James, she's still Amelia's friend. Or was. They weren't wrong." I felt like a complete failure as a sister, as a daughter, as a human being. I mumbled another apology and retreated, feeling about 2 inches tall. The flight home was its own special kind of hell. Our family, or what was left of the United Front, was booked on the same flight back to London. Amelia and James were supposed to be on a later flight to start their honeymoon in Bali, but there were hushed rumors that the honeymoon was now on hold. No one knew for sure. The airport transfer from the resort was a masterclass in awkward silence. Aunt Carol sat in the front of the minibus, occasionally sighing dramatically and muttering about disgraceful behavior. Uncle Ben was trying to engage the driver in a deep conversation about St. Lucian politics, clearly desperate to avoid any wedding-related talk. My parents sat ramrod straight, staring out the window. I was sandwiched between two of my younger cousins, who kept trying to get me to spill more details, their eyes wide with morbid curiosity. I just shook my head and pretended to be engrossed in a safety pamphlet. At the airport, the check-in and security lines were a fresh nightmare. We kept bumping into other wedding guests. Some offered strained smiles. Others, particularly James's relatives, just looked right through me. I felt like I had a giant scarlet W for record of weddings embroidered on my chest. The actual flight was 7 hours of pure, unadulterated tension. Our family group was spread across a few rows. I was, thankfully, not seated directly next to my parents or Aunt Carol. I had a window seat, next to a very large man who snored, which was actually a welcome distraction. My parents were a few rows ahead. Amelia and James were nowhere to be seen, confirmation, I guess, that they weren't on our flight. I didn't know whether to be relieved or more worried. Were they still at the resort, fighting? Had they broken up? Was Amelia flying home alone later? The uncertainty was gnawing at me. Every time the seatbelt sign went off, I'd see members of our family doing the awkward shuffle up and down the aisle, trying to avoid eye contact with certain other members. Aunt Carol made a point of very loudly asking the flight attendant for a ginger ale, then adding, "My nerves are just shot after that event." She gave a pointed look in my general direction. Subtlety has never been her strong suit. Uncle Barry, who had apparently found a new source of rum at the airport duty-free, or perhaps had a flask, was a bit too jolly. He kept trying to start sing-alongs, much to the horror of my mother and the amusement of some of the other passengers who weren't part of our drama-filled entourage. When we landed at Heathrow, the palpable sense of relief that the flight was over was quickly replaced by the dawning horror of, now what? How do we go back to normal life after this? Are Sunday dinners cancelled indefinitely? Will Christmas be a war zone? My parents offered me a ride home, which I accepted, mainly because I couldn't face the thought of navigating the tube in my current emotional state. The car ride was quiet, but not the angry quiet of the previous day. It was more of a tired, resigned quiet. Just before they dropped me off at my flat in Clapham, my dad turned to me. "Emily," he said, his voice softer now. "What happened, happened. It was a mess. A terrible, unfortunate mess. But Amelia is your sister. This family, well, we're family. Things are raw right now. Give it some time. And for heaven's sake, try to be more careful with your words in the future." The family was still very much divided. Aunt Carol was leading the "James is a villain, Emily is his accomplice" faction. Uncle Ben was trying to play peacemaker, suggesting a family summit with a talking stick, an idea that was met with universal scorn. My cousins were mostly just enjoying the gossip. My parents were trying to stay neutral, but it was clear they were worried sick about Amelia. And me? I was in limbo. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, even in my own flat. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, expecting it to be either a furious message from Amelia or a summons from some kind of family court. The rum situation has become a running joke, albeit a dark one, within the less judgmental factions of the family. My cousin Tom, not James's best man, a different Tom, my cousin, texted me a picture of a giant bottle of rum with the caption, "Emergency supplies for the next family gathering." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So, that's where we are. The dust is starting to settle, but the landscape is forever changed. I still feel an overwhelming sense of guilt. I know I didn't mean to cause this, but intent doesn't really matter when the consequences are this catastrophic. I'm trying to give Amelia her space, but the silence is killing me. I keep wondering if my relationship with my sister, and by extension, my entire family, will ever be the same. And I still can't believe Emily, the usually fairly sensible one, okay, maybe note ways sensible, but never this disastrous, and the one responsible for Weddinggate 2025 and the Great Caribbean rum shortage. What a legacy. I'm just waiting. Waiting for a sign, an olive branch, or maybe just for the local Tesco to have a sale on rum so I can build my own emergency stash. Because something tells me I'm going to need it. Update 2. Hello again, internet strangers and surprisingly insightful advice givers. It's been about 6 months since my last update, and let me tell you, it has been a long 6 months. If my life were a TV show, this would be the season where the writers really lean into the slow burn, the character development, and the occasional, very awkward family dinner. The good news? The rum situation has been rectified, at least in my personal life. I now have a well-stocked bar. The bad news? Well, things are still complicated. But there's progress. Maybe. After the dramatic return from St. Lucia, life settled into a weird new normal. Amelia and I were officially not speaking. Not in a screaming matches and slammed doors kind of way anymore, but in a heavy, suffocating silence. I'd send texts, thinking of you, hope you're okay, and they'd go unanswered, marked as read but met with a digital void. It was heartbreaking. We'd gone from being sisters who shared everything to two people tiptoeing around a giant, unacknowledged elephant in every room, even virtual ones. The family remained a patchwork of alliances and cold shoulders. Aunt Carol, bless her dramatic heart, maintained her frosty demeanor towards me for a solid 3 months. Every family gathering, and there were a surprising number of birthdays and anniversaries that spring, almost as if the universe was testing us, was an exercise in strategic seeding and conversation redirection. I became an expert at suddenly needing to check on something in the kitchen whenever she entered a room. Uncle Ben, bless his well-meaning soul, kept trying to organize healing circles, which everyone politely declined. My parents, bless their patient hearts, were caught in the middle, trying to broker peace without actually taking sides, a diplomatic tightrope walk that left them perpetually exhausted. James and Amelia, I learned through my mother, who had become my reluctant conduit for Amelia-related news, did not go on their Bali honeymoon. They cancelled it. Instead, they started couples therapy. Apparently, the Chloe ex-girlfriend bridesmaid bomb, my official term for it, had unearthed a lot of other, smaller issues in their relationship. Things about communication, about honesty, about James's tendency to avoid conflict by, well, not mentioning that his ex was going to be a pivotal part of their wedding. Shocking, I know. The therapy was, by all accounts, grueling. There were good weeks and bad weeks. Mom would report that Amelia sounded a bit more hopeful one Tuesday, only to say she sounded utterly despondent by the following Friday. It was a roller coaster I wasn't even on, but I felt every dip and climb. As for Chloe, she faded into the background, at least publicly. I heard she'd sent Amelia another apology, this one handwritten and apparently very sincere. Amelia still hadn't directly responded, but Mom thought the expensive crystal vase had at least been moved from the hallway to a spare room, which was apparently a sign of glacial progress in the Amelia-verse. Chloe, I imagine, was probably just trying to move on with her life, hoping to never be part of a wedding-related international incident again. I can relate. My own therapy, yes, I started therapy too, turns out, accidentally nuking your sister's wedding and fracturing your family takes a toll, was focused on guilt, boundaries, and learning that sometimes, even when you mess up colossally, the world doesn't actually end. My therapist, a very calm woman named Dr. Evans, was great at helping me unpack why I'd blurted out my disastrous comment in the first place, a potent cocktail of champagne, a desire to be included, and a spectacular misjudgment of the social landscape, apparently. She also helped me understand that while my actions had consequences, I wasn't solely responsible for everyone else's reactions or pre-existing secrets. That was a tough pill to swallow, but a necessary one. The first breakthrough, if you can call it that, came about 2 months post-St. Lucia. It was our grandmother's 80th birthday. A big family lunch was planned at a local pub, the Swan's Neck, a place filled with decades of family memories. Avoiding it was not an option. I was dreading it, obviously. I'd practiced my "I'm fine" everything's fine, smile in the mirror until my face ached. Amelia and James arrived together. They looked tired, but also strangely more united than they had at their own wedding. They were holding hands. A small thing, but it felt significant. Amelia didn't make eye contact with me initially. I kept my distance, making small talk with my less judgmental cousins and focusing on wishing Gran a happy birthday. Then, during a lull in the conversation, Amelia walked over to the table where I was sitting. My heart leaped into my throat. This was it. The confrontation. The final severing of ties. "Emily," she said, her voice quiet but clear. I looked up. "Amelia." She took a deep breath. "Mom said you've been asking about me." I nodded, unable to speak. "James and I were working on things," she continued, glancing back at him. He gave her a small, encouraging nod. "It's been hard. Really hard." "What happened?" "It brought a lot of stuff to the surface." "I know," I whispered. "And I am still so incredibly sorry for my part in it. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't wish I could take it back." She looked at me then, really looked at me, for the first time in months. Her eyes were still sad, but some of the icy anger had thawed. "I know you didn't mean it, Emily." "Not really. You can be a clueless idiot sometimes, but you're not malicious." It wasn't exactly an absolution, but it was the kindest thing she'd said to me since before the fateful mimosa incident. I felt a wave of relief so profound it almost made me dizzy. "Clueless idiot is probably fair," I managed, a small, shaky smile on my face. She almost smiled back. "Almost. We're a long way from okay," she said. "All of us. But maybe we can start figuring it out." And then she walked back to James. It wasn't a hug. It wasn't a full reconciliation. But it was an opening. A tiny crack of light in a very dark tunnel. After that, things began to shift, slowly. Painfully slowly. Amelia started responding to my texts, usually with 1 or 2 word answers, but it was better than silence. We had a brief, stilted coffee one afternoon. We didn't talk about the wedding, or Chloe, or James's ex-life. We talked about work, about a new series on Netflix, about the weather. It was superficial, but it was a start. The family dynamic also began to thaw. Aunt Carol, perhaps sensing a shift in Amelia's attitude, downgraded her hostility towards me from active glares to more of a passive-aggressive sighing, which I considered a victory. Uncle Ben, bless him, finally got his healing circle, in a roundabout way. My parents organized a family barbecue at their place, ostensibly just a casual get-together, but with the unspoken agenda of, let's all try to be adults. It was surprisingly okay. There were still awkward moments, topics of conversation that were hastily avoided. But people were talking. Laughing, even. James, who had been a pariah in Aunt Carol's eyes, was actually seen having a civil conversation with her about gardening. Miracles, it seemed, could still happen. The rum made a tentative comeback at that barbecue. My dad, in a gesture of either bravery or foolishness, had bought a bottle of good Caribbean rum and made a big pitcher of punch. There was a collective holding of breath when he offered it around. Then Uncle Barry boomed, "Well, don't mind if I do," and the tension broke. People drank the punch. And no international incidents were triggered. Now, 6 months on from St. Lucia, where are we? Well, Amelia and James are still together. Their therapy is ongoing, but from what I gather, it's helping. They're communicating more. They're rebuilding trust. It's not a fairy tale, but it's real. They even rebooked their honeymoon, a quieter trip to the Scottish Highlands this time. Probably less chance of bumping into ex-girlfriends there. My relationship with Amelia is a work in progress. We talk more regularly. We've even managed a few conversations about the incident, as it's now semi-jokingly referred to in hushed tones. She's admitted that while my revelation was the catalyst, the underlying issues with James were there all along. She's still hurt by the secrecy from both James and Chloe, but she's also acknowledged that holding on to that anger indefinitely isn't healthy. She's even considering reaching out to Chloe, to try and salvage something of their friendship, though that's a bridge she hasn't quite crossed yet. As for me, I've learned a lot. About the power of words. About the complexities of family. About the importance of owning your mistakes, even when they're unintentional. I'm still more careful with my words, especially after a mimosa or two. Dr. Evans would be proud. The family is still a bit wobbly. Like a table with one slightly shorter leg. But it's standing. Christmas is coming up, which will be the next big test. I'm cautiously optimistic. Aunt Carol has even stopped sighing in my presence and recently asked for my opinion on a new brand of tea, which is practically a declaration of peace in her language. So, that's my saga. The destination wedding that descended into a soap opera, fueled by an accidental revelation and a critical rum shortage. It's a story I'll probably be telling, with a mixture of embarrassment and disbelief, for the rest of my life. Things aren't perfect. They might never be perfect again in that shiny, pre-St. Lucia way. But they're better. We're finding a new kind of normal. And honestly, after the chaos of the last year, better feels pretty damn good. I still get a slight nervous twitch when I hear the words, destination wedding, or see an overly enthusiastic bridesmaid, but I'm healing. And my home bar is now impressively stocked with various rums. Just in case. You never know when you'll need to navigate another family crisis, or just want a really good mojito without causing an international incident. And that, I suppose, is progress. What do you think? Tell us in the comments. Like the video and hit the subscribe button for more Reddit stories.